Hello folks and welcome back. In this presentation we'll be going over chapter 10 from my book that's going to cover Bournemouth 2019, Black Mirror AI technology, Pluto, Angels and Archangels, Merkaba, Encountering the Seraphim, New Forest November trip, Christmas 2019 Kundalini experience, chakras, the Djed and Jedi. Now before I start, I'm going to be reading from my book mostly in this presentation. I was going to re-emphasize with obviously what I've covered so far in regards to my experiences using entheogens. Now, I would not advise, given what is happening on the planet, to delve into any of these entheogens, right? I'm lucky based on the template and codes that I'm carrying that I was able to resist and push through some of the encounters that I came across that obviously I've shared with you folks as a result of taking these mushrooms and entheogens. All right, because it does open yourself up for infiltration and attacks and invites those kind of forces to try and probe at you. And if you're not prepared or strong enough, it can go horribly wrong. Just one word of advice: do not try this at home. Please do not copy me. It was only unique to my journey and my findings and my kind of renaissance mission down here, in order to kind of delve a little bit deeper into the occult and into the forces of darkness and doing the things that I did, that I was coded for. Okay, and if you're not coded for it, you would not be guided towards it. So always trust your intuition and your higher self. That I highly do not recommend, and please do not copy me. Okay, there's plenty of useful, safe techniques in order for you guys to follow, in order to unlock neurogenesis, in order to align yourself, activate DNA, that you do not need these substances, because it can, and obviously I didn't know at the time, it can plug you into what's running into the grids. And because we're in a blended system, you could be susceptible to being plugged into the Metatronic, anti-Christic, finite life, full mathematics, right? Especially, obviously, when I was taking this, I knew I was activated to help counteract the Jehovah's trumpets and kind of disband the forces that are coming through, Saturn and Phantom Arcturus up through that kind of 7-7 gate network and through the moon here on the planet, which is quite obvious to me looking back, connecting the dots. But I realized, why I experienced what I experienced, because of what was running in the grids with this invisible war drama. Okay, so just a caution and a warning for you folks that you don't need it. Do not follow me. It's only unique with my experiences, and I'm lucky because I knew I had the codes and I had the capabilities and the strength in order to go through what I went through, and otherwise hopefully help assist on the mission down here, which I feel like I have to a certain degree, which obviously, has expedited things. I'm not the only one. There's millions of us here, indigos, finborns, human energetics, all doing our part to help, anchor that Christic, eternal life, fail-safe, time waves and energies. All right, so there's much more safer, organic ways and means in which to activate yourself, one of which is actually just listening to information, connecting the dots, which is revelationary. Knowledge is power, and like I said, for me it was certainly what triggered my activation with my 10th capstone chakra awakening back in 2017, of knowing and learning about the powers of our subconscious mind and the quantum physics universe, and how it's very amenable to our consciousness. Matter precedes consciousness, consciousness precedes matter in the mind before matter universe. Never underestimate the power of actually just studying, seeking the knowledge, and doing techniques too over at arcangel.com with Iyasha Ashiana, speaker one from Melchizedek Cloister Emerald Order, and working methodically through what they offer on their website as well, which I obviously leave a link to down in the description beneath this video. All right, so I just want to put that out there as like a disclaimer, which I'll probably put in the description too. Do not try this at home. With that being said, let's dive straight into this chapter. So I'm going to be reading from my book mostly, so let's go straight into it. So those few weeks over Easter 2019 were pretty intense, but very revelatory for my journey. A month after, I moved to a room share in Bournemouth for that summer and got a job detailing cars. The first place I moved into was quite interesting, as it had a lot of EMF surrounding me, and it was here I was raising my awareness of this fact as I became more sensitive to energies. There was a flat screen TV on the wall in the room I was in, with a sofa opposite. One night I remember being in the room in the dreamscape astrals, and I was pinned to the couch by an entity coming out of the black mirror /TV in the form of the eye-pet goat, the Djed type entity with one eye, who had a head connected to some kind of tentacle. If anyone recalls watching that series, eye-pet goat, it was pretty much exactly the same entity as that. That was coming through the Black Mirror of the TV. So I alluded to this before, that these on a higher dimensional level, so if you're in the astrals, then you will see, if you're in a room where there's black mirrors that hasn't been covered or hasn't been dispelled or deactivated, you will be susceptible for entities to pass through them like portals from the black hole pit, these phantom matrices. So as it was coming through the TV, it was trying to grow in size and pin me / paralyze me to the sofa I was sat on. The force was pretty great, but I managed to keep saying no and was able to stand up and walk toward the TV to counteract the energy and push it back into where it came from. Then I woke up. It is interesting as black mirrors were used to communicate with spirits and open up portals to other dimensions back in the day, and now we have them everywhere, with most connected to the internet, the World Wide Web, www, which was created by Berners-Lee at CERN in Geneva, where they are no doubt opening portals and helping to run Metatronic energy on Earth under the guise of scientific research. Now, I did on both my YouTube channels, you can see I did a presentation on decoding CERN, okay, which is a really good one to watch, that I go right into what that whole thing's all about, open up portals, etc. Moreover, when www is translated to Hebrew, the gematria equates to 666, which is all part of getting the technologies on planet for the stellar activation cycle to help run and establish the Metatronic energies into Earth's grids and the psychotronic net that acts to control the consciousness of the population to prevent it from ascending. I'll guess Berners-Lee, like most of those world stage Illuminati managed figureheads, are all cover-ups for ET/meta-terrestrial orders and inspired visions to bring about certain technologies on planet. This goes into the theory shared by Pierce Back of how these ETs are essentially mining knowledge or human intelligence, as it is the most important commodity in creation, especially when attributing this concept of a predatory force being disconnected from the spirit of God source and the eternal potential of innovation to only happen through beings who still possess that connection. It wouldn't be a stretch either to believe that AI technologies used by these regressive races can read our thoughts and can mine information and control us through a lot of this technology we're now interfacing with. Something which the Super Soldier Talk community have covered in great detail when affirming the presence of technologies that are used to capture and manipulate souls and fragment them to create altars, etc. And we'll get into that later on in my book. I go into when I came into the Super Soldier Talk community. Very, very interesting information and body of knowledge to also dissect, to consider kind of more macro level of this intergalactic drama of some of the things that these Dracos especially have been getting up to with the interplanetary corporation structure and this concept of cloning and super soldiers using femtotech, ventonite bots, stuff like this that are even smaller than nanobots. Truly incredible. So if you look at the iPhone or iPad, for instance, you would rub and touch on the buttons to reveal to the priestcraft your sins and things you wouldn't even reveal to the people closest to you. That is all stored and monitored through these devices. Interestingly, the ephod and the breastplate of judgment was a vestment worn by the priest, which was used by the person to touch so that the priest could see the sins of the individual, either through some kind of supernatural interface or confession. We also have the logo of Apple showing a bite out of an apple. Could that be somehow related to this poison apple symbolism we have already decoded? It seems sin and guilt trip programming has certainly been weaponized to control the masses, whose prosecutors and attorney generals are normally the very ones who have fallen and have and are committing the biggest sin of all with what they have decided to perpetuate on others. As we recall, the god within the MCO AMCC cosmogony does not play Warlin. That seems to be an attribute associated with the fallen, self-appointed godlets. This technology is a necessary evil though, as our higher sensory abilities have been switched off due to the mutations. The internet has actually been a good resource and tool to access important information and make valued connections on this journey, which Catch-22, when you come into the right knowledge and techniques, can actually help activate your DNA. But people must be mindful of the power these devices possess, as the word device has at its root the word vice. So it's all about making sure you control it and it doesn't control you. And as we will see later, most of this technology now on planet has been deliberately seeded by regressive ETs to help assist in their Earth, Templar, Final Conflict drama, New World Order takeover attempt. Now, going into Pluto, my experience with Pluto when studying the Kabbalah is quite interesting. while still at this room share in Bournemouth, I was studying the Kabbalah a little bit more in depth whilst there, and I remember linking the Sephiroth to the planets in our solar system just off the top of my head, and focused mainly on Da'at, being Pluto, before going to bed one night. I remember waking up the next morning and noticed my candle was lit and my computer was on, but with the screen switched off. I did not leave the candle on overnight, and I turned on the screen and it was playing a YouTube video by NASA about Pluto. So you can see me took a photo of that on the slide. You can see the dangers for anyone seeking knowledge of the occult when awakening that the most proliferated and accessible science is that of the fallen Metatron, black hole based 10 or 11 esoteric sciences and philosophies that are pushed, where most people like myself start absorbing and forming my world / universal / spiritual view as it being the truth. It wasn't until the end of 2021 when I came across the MCO AMCC teachings, which offered me information that changed that view. So yeah, just to re-emphasize, that's why it's very dangerous, you know, once you start waking up, that you kind of go down these false paths that kind of dead ends, quite literally. So it plugs you into the kind of philosophies, ideologies, and cosmogenies and geometries, right, of the fallen forces in the occult texts and the edited texts especially. And there's many different flavors depending on, you know, where that soul individual consciousness is aligned with. I mean, I'm lucky that I only dabbled into very shallow, but otherwise through Crowley Jr., who was my companion at that time, through him, he was revealing to me a lot deeper and darker practices and arts and sciences of that world that I was just kind of like intrigued in observing again in education and not judging, but just kind of really feeling into how I resonate with that, which I was never drawn towards, like going really deep into studying the Kabbalah. It was just like surface level, but obviously me working with it one night and just kind of putting the planets in the model of the tree and meditating and thinking that's linked to Pluto, it unlocked this supernatural experience of the candle being lit and the computer obviously was turned on, because I had like windows open on YouTube. It was obviously playing videos throughout the night and then happened to just be left on the video of Pluto. Okay, so it certainly can bring about magic for individuals who work with that, but it's you're drawing from a poisonous well, in my opinion, when working with those fallen codes and energies and entities who, in order to trade, will want part of you in return. So nothing's free, because you know they live in a finite universe, an imploding holographic reality field. So there must be a give and take. There must be a trade, right? And normally that is part of your soul essence. When people say you sell your soul, quite literally, that's what happens, and that's linked into your free will, volition, for many lifetimes, possibly until you run out of quanta. And that's what these guys are after, and that's what they prey on. When obviously we're blank slating down here, that you will be susceptible enough, individuals will be susceptible enough to want to sell their soul just to get like a lifetime of riches, right? That even sometimes these guys, like, they're so evil and have no honor that they would just throw you under the bus as soon as the deal's done after a few years, if they promise 40 years, because they just, like I said, there's no honor amongst thieves. They're spineless, and at the end of the day, they're just after perpetuating their immortality by robbing our life force from living systems. So yeah, got to be very careful. So I continued. The place I stayed at was surrounded by a lot of accommodation in flats. There were these block of flats that I saw on numerous occasions that had lots of weird cycling lights that I had described and witnessed ever since my first LSD trip, if you recollect, and my time in Albany, Bahamas, after the events at Cannon Hill, the two orbs in the woods, November 2018. There was this one time, it's kind of one image I took that you can see on the bottom there of, a few of these rooms that were just pulsing on and off. There was this one time where a guy was just standing there with all these weird lights going off in this room in a trance, repeating the same motion for what seemed like ages, staring my direction from the window. It definitely felt like I was still being watched, with this presence being felt around me no matter where I would go or end up, as I think I was well and truly now on the map with the rulers of this matrix, that they had to keep tabs on me, something that is still the current theme, even to this day as I write this. I'm pretty sure most awakened indigos and individuals will attest to that as well. There's always like eyes on us, and especially if you're carrying like the higher codes, the Fatali especially would want to try and come in and dark flower you and take you over. So they got more of your soul quantum, what you're connected into, and what they can grab hold of, but access to more of the grids here as well that they can maybe try and take down with them. It's all coming to an end. They try to take me, and I write about this later on in the chapters, and I experienced them coming in, trying to come into my body, possession. They were like really, really trying hard, and I was just fighting back, and yeah, managed to get them out. And still, they prod and probe at me, and it's done through other individuals too. Unfortunately, I've got people close to me who have been dark flowered and they're fully possessed. But it's just kind of one of those things. It's gonna be patient. But yeah, I write about it in later chapters that we'll go through. So yeah, you're gonna be so careful during this time. It's a bit crazy. So I write, one night I walked down to the beach, as I often did, only living a 5-minute walk from the beachfront there in Bournemouth, where there was this amazing lightning storm quite far out at sea, where I stopped to observe for a time right outside the Marriott Hotel. Whilst watching the storm, a light as bright as Venus in the night sky whizzed over from the storm and stopped like a fixed planet right above where I stood. I could hear a few other people comment on seeing it, asking what it is, etc. It must have been there for a good minute before completely fading out of view. Could it have been a ship, a being in pure light form traveling in Merkaba? It's kind of like a representation of what I saw. It's not an actual image, but it was like the image on the left of the two orbs, but just one orb, and it just flew right over me. Yeah, I remember it, and I was just like, wow, what is that? What's going on? Manly P. Hall had this to say about angels and archangels. Open quote. The Rosicrucians and the Illuminati, describing the angels, archangels, and other celestial creatures, declared that they resembled small suns, being centers of radiant energy surrounded by streamers of Vrillic force. From these outpouring streamers of force is derived the popular belief that angels have wings. These wings are corona-like fans of light by means of which the celestial creatures propel themselves through the subtle essences of the superphysical worlds. True mystics are unanimous in their denial of the theory that the angels and archangels are human in form, as so often pictured. A human figure would be utterly useless in the ethereal substances through which they manifest. Close quote. If we remind ourselves of the science of dimensionality, then we know what appears as light is physical, but at a high frequency and state of matter. And within the MCO-AMCC teachings, there are vehicles of light, Merkaba, that match the descriptions herein described that surrounds the body, which acts to carry the body through dimensional and density lock systems and all the spaces in between, right, in order to dematerialize and rematerialize within the required frequency bands of that reality system to be in sync with it and reappear as physical again. A being existing in the high harmonic universe / densities will always possess more energy in quantum due to the nature of how the dimensional stack of creation is structured and the energy that's contained therein. And just like my experience with the orbs in Cannon Hill Woods, if the individual does not have the capacity to handle high frequencies, then their senses and body can become overloaded with information processing, rendering it unable to be consciously present, like Crowley Jr. was, or in extreme instances cause damage, like a circuit board to a computer receiving more power than it is able to handle. Something will break. On the flip side, it can trigger activations and initiations for those ready to encounter such an experience. And with that experience, I witnessed the orbs described with the Rosicrucians, but also saw a being that I believe manifested from that orb and was able to shift into the two states at will. Okay, so even though what the so-called Manly P. Hall's referencing with the Rosicrucians and Illuminati, it's both, right? It's both. They can be like that with a Vrillic force, like wings spread out from a sphere of like a Merkaba orb form, but you can also manifest into material form. Right, so they've got the choice. Beings at that level, as an adept, can rearrange their atomic structure, and even some beings can shapeshift into anything and everything. So the MCO AMCC teachings do also teach of many beings who do have wings in the high harmonic universes. It also mentioned that the planets and stars do have arcs and angles with their corresponding energies interacting via the rod and the staff, as we have covered, which also is referred to as the arcangels of these celestial spheres. Whether there are actual intelligences associated with each celestial sphere is not taught within the MCO AMCC teachings, other than recognizing that they are conscious beings. It's only in the occult teachings of Kabbalah and other schools that teach the characters and intelligences that reside within or are part of this celestial sphere in which it is associated. So I must admit, it is not very clear what the answer is to this. Maybe it is all of the above, which I believe it is. Astrology especially is kind of like the science that gets to know the characteristics, right, of these so-called celestial beings. And certainly in the MCO, AMCC teachings, it does talk a lot about Earth, especially in the consciousness of Earth, and some of the conversations I think Yasha had with it in regards to its viewpoint, and what's going on and its choices, right? Which is quite interesting. But yeah, a lot of the other planets and kind of stars, you have to rely more on astrology in order to glean, where they're in alignment with in regards to, their character and their personality and their influence. As I touched on before, with this concept of astrology, how some planets, especially within like a semi-fallen system, will have distorted templates, thus will be distributing amongst the source field distorted energy that can bring about more polarity, especially with obviously what's been done to the astrological model, given where we are and what the Earth is plugged into, that it certainly is a science that is true in regards to observing nature. However, we are in a reality field where nature is unnatural, given the manipulation and mutations and the things that are plugged into some of these constellations, some of these planets, right, with the interfaced black hole alignment, wormhole structure of their gates as you're going through in the Cathara grid, and everything else with the manipulations they've done, the kind of crystal grids, the things that they might have put into those planets and those stars, that will certainly then distribute those mutations too, which affects everything within its kind of, I guess, vicinity, right, within the source field, the morphogenetic field. So there is a scene out of the popular TV series called Supernatural that depicts this phenomenon of so-called angels being able to take on a human form from their true form, which is of a much higher frequency of what would appear to us as light if they're coming from a higher harmonic universe / density. So remember the Notre Dame Cathedral, those entities too. So there's a scene from the TV series Supernatural where Dean, at the top there, encounters the character Castiel down the bottom, which is an angel of the Lord, who first appears to Dean earlier in his true form, which interrupts the electronics inside the gas station Dean was in, where Dean experiences deafening high-pitched ringing that shatters all the windows. A good representation following the science of dimensionality, densities, and energy, which can always appear overwhelming for the being whose vessel is synced to a lower harmonic than the being it encounters from a higher harmonic / frequency. Transcripts. So there's a little transcript that I read from the actual TV show in this given scene that you can see a screenshot of Dean. So Dean's the character at the top, Castiel's the angel at the bottom. Dean, who are you? Castiel. It says Castiel. Dean, yeah, I figured that much. I mean, what are you? Castiel replies, I'm an angel of the Lord. Dean says, get the hell out of here. There's no such thing. Castiel says, this is your problem, Dean. You have no faith. And Castiel shows Dean the shadow of his wings. You can see in the picture there. Dean then says, some angel you are. You burned out that poor woman's eyes. Castiel says, I warned her not to spy in my true form. It can be overwhelming to humans, and so can my real voice. But you already knew that. And Dean says, you mean the gas station and the motel? That was you talking? And Castiel nods. Dean then goes on to say, buddy, next time lower the volume. Castiel replies, that was my mistake. Certain people, special people, can perceive my true visage. I thought that you would be one of them. I was wrong. And Dean replies, and what visage are you in now, huh? What, holy tax accountant? Castiel says, this is a vessel. Dean replies, you possessing some poor bastard? Castiel says, he's a devout man. He actually prayed for this. And Dean replies, look, pal, I'm not buying what you're selling. So who are you really? Castiel says, I told you. And Dean says, right. And why would an angel rescue me from hell? Castiel says, good things do happen, Dean. And then Dean exclaims, not in my experience. Castiel replies, what's the matter? You don't think you deserve to be saved? And Dean says, why did you do it? Castiel, because God commanded it. Obviously, we've got to kind of look at this from a maybe Jehovah's, Protestant, biblical cosmogony of who God is and these angels, right? So note the burning of the eyes of the woman who looked at Castiel's true form, which would have been of pure light, with like what we see when looking at the sun, but more intense, as this would have been in closer proximity. Our sun is universal stargate 4 and harmonic universe 2, density 2, which is half silica base, half carbon base reality field. Beings from that density, or even higher, will naturally possess more energy within their templates, which will appear as light from our density 1 universe in carbon-based template. However, if we had access to our 12 substrand DNA template and plasma, spirit and light body structures, then we would be able to adjust our frequency accordingly in order to sync with beings and reality systems so we may perceive and converse with them and not be overwhelmed. Even the ancient mysteries knew this as a reality when attributing beings at high frequency and composed of different matter to be able to inhabit such places as the sun. When Manly P. Hall writes, open quote, some secret orders have taught that the sun was inhabited by a race of creatures with bodies composed of a radiant spiritual ether, not unlike in its constituency the actual glowing ball of the sun itself. The solar heat had no harmful effect upon them, because their organisms were sufficiently refined and sensitized to harmonize with the sun's tremendous vibratory rate. These creatures resemble miniature suns, being a little larger than a dinner plate in size, although some of the more powerful are considerably larger. The color is the golden white light of the sun, and from them emanate 4 streamers of vril. These streamers are often of great length and are in constant motion. A peculiar palpitation is to be noted throughout the structure of the globe, and is communicated in the form of ripples to the emanating streamers. The greatest and most luminous of these spheres is the Archangel Michael, and the entire order of solar life which resemble him and dwell upon the sun are called by modern Christians the archangels or the spirits of the light. End quote. As we see, there is still a dichotomy between the ancient mystery school's interpretation of these beings in what Yasha translated / claimed with reference to Archangel Michael being associated with the fallen angelic Anunnaki collective. Could there be a deeper spiritual interpretation to these spirits juxtaposed to physical manifestation as placed within the holographic dimensionalized reality field that transcends the genealogy of manifest beings within the stacked holographic reality field of the teachings? The MCO AMCC teachings does reveal that our sun, which is Solar Stargate 4, had been compromised by fallen intruder forces, which could also frame Archangel Michael as being a guardian who took over that gate but on behalf of these fallen forces. If we were not mindful of the reality field we wanted to visit from a higher dimensional realm and forgot to adjust our energies appropriately, then we could damage the integrity of the material and beings around us, as our frequency would naturally be too great, just as Castiel did when visiting Dean for the first time at the gas station. Thus, as the densities became more gross, from density 4 down to density 1, our local universe energy naturally disperses itself to accommodate the reality field along with the beings who reside within it. That's why we have a direct line of incarnational soul, oversoul, avatar, and Rishi levels of identities stationed at these various harmonic universes that downsteps in frequency in order to abide by the laws of physics that govern them. Now you can imagine if the whole planetary and star structures that house stargates that connect to higher dimensions and harmonic universes within the universal Stargate Templar system in any universe that is receiving the higher dimensional energies during a stellar activation cycle to bridge the higher and lower densities to allow for transit, then it doesn't take a genius to work out that if the template of that planetary, star, or even a biological being's body is damaged and unable to run and receive the higher frequencies, then they would fry, implode, shatter, damage, and or break. Thus we can see why it is important for the fallen angelic races to do what they do to whole planets, solar systems, and galaxies in order to control and manipulate the energy of these systems for their own ends. Likewise, it is important for the Christic races to try help heal these templates within our own biology and the planet we incarnate on to assist it in breaking free from any artificial bias and distortions it is being held within, so it can regain the ability to shift and syncopate templates when these cycles come. Especially if what the MCO AMCC teachings say is true, given the reality of the manipulations done to us here on Earth with the Metatronic technologies, we've all been suffering from amnesia and led as sheep from cradle to grave, being inserted with false programs designed to keep us all subjugated to false gods and their collectives unawares of the true nature of reality and our divine birthright. It's like we're all a bunch of sleeping human angels, gods and goddesses who have really been messed with, making all of us a mere shadow of our former selves. As Yasha states with the Aphia, higher heavenly councils claiming, open quote, Earth humans have been genetically captured, energetically castrated, and intentionally cultivated to be clueless, powerless, and inorganically immortal, close quote. A condition which TV shows like these with Supernatural just helps to reinforce this separation from them and us, when forgetting that they, the angels, right, used to be we before we took on the distortions. So that summer I also did a solo ceremony, but this time back in Wimborne in a cornfield, which was an interesting experience. I had some mushrooms again and walked down to the field listening to some instrumental music on my headphones. This is all in 2019, summer 2019. I remember noticing a tree at the edge of this cornfield that showed some funky somatic patterns etched into the tree that drew me toward it. I sat with my back to the tree, looking out toward the cornfield, which had a steady, elevated slope, and the corn stalks were probably about 3 foot high. So they weren't very big, but they're just, they're growing. As I was listening to the music, which had a very drummy shamanic feel to it, my consciousness moved down my spine and into what felt like the roots of the tree, merged with my root chakra, where all of a sudden my vision was shrouded in red mist. I was there for some time, just feeling the sensation before pulling my consciousness back up to my head and in body again. I then proceeded to sing a little rap to myself with positive affirmations along with the beat. The energies were very good, and my vibe was pretty high with a constant grin on my face that seemed to be the normal facial fixture for quite some time. All of a sudden, the whole reality field of my experience was interrupted with a very powerful presence that felt like it froze time and pierced the veil of matter, like someone standing behind a curtain, but slowly moving forward so you can see the outline of the being. This presence revealed itself in the form of what must have been 30 to 40 eyes along the top of the growing corn stalks to observe me, which locked us both into recognition, where time froze, and I think even my music stopped for what seemed like anywhere between 5 to 10 seconds of time, wherein this protrusion into the reality field receded and nature resumed. Yeah, it was quite an incredible experience. I just remember it came through and it just locked on. Everything was just frozen, and we just both acknowledged one another. And it was like all these eyes, and I knew it was connected to like a real large consciousness, like a real large being. And then it just slowly kind of went back and out of sight again. And you can see, almost saw the matter move, and the heads of the corn stalks move as it kind of penetrated the material realm that I was in and syncopated in order to just kind of see, as if it was donning, physical eyes, what was happening with me, and kind of just acknowledging the presence and letting me know the presence too. So yeah, very interesting experience. And I write and continue, I remember thinking about Seraphim, or opening wheels, which are represented with lots of eyes around them, and how this being was very powerful and unlike any material form within the known race lines and forms of our time matrix, as documented in the MCO AMCC teachings. It seemed this being was interested for whatever reason and poked through the veil of matter to take a look. I resumed and carried on for a bit, listening to my music and rapping. I then got up and walked over to the top of the mound, where I sat with a view overlooking a few other pastures that had cows grazing on them. This is where another interesting occurrence happened that was similar to the crown chakra connection with this other girl that night of my LSD trip. Yeah, if you recollect, I had that experience of like spooky action at a distance that kind of turned her around, and I felt this connection again, like in my 10th chakra point above my head, that triggered the girl to kind of like spin around before going into the house, right? After me having like these visions of this cosmic mage, the dragon, and then seeing the lights off the back of my home, and this kind of projection of a girl in the back of the car seat kind of waved me to go and see where the entrance is to the house that had funky lights. So it was all a bit bizarre. So I had this happen again. But this time there was a spooky action at a distance that I felt above and connected to my head with this invisible lightning strike that slapped the ground right near where these cows were grazing, that let off a loud crack, which simultaneously jolted energy in my head that made the cows jump and run off. So whatever occurred, I was intrinsically linked to, which I had no real conscious control over from what I remember, that just happened, similar to the event with the girl, but not quite as intense. Yeah, I remember this. I was just sat here and I can see in the far paddock, all these cows grazing. Then all of a sudden, I just had this connection of a lightning bolt just going, invisible lightning bolts going, and I heard this crack, and it fell right next to all these cows grazing. They just scattered because it scared the bejeebies out of them. And I felt when the thing hit, I felt the jolt in my head as well, simultaneously. So that was really bizarre, that experience. So before that, I remember lying on my back with my arms spread out, bathing in the sun, and all this energy was rushing down both my arms, where I felt extremely powerful. It felt like the sun was charging me up, quite literally, which got to the point of me feeling like I was going to explode. It made me sit up and snap out of it, where another interesting phenomena happened with the plane that was flying overhead, and what felt like some thought form and reality manipulations in the form of feeling like this plane was going to crash on top of me, but turned out to be a joke from this entity who paid me a visit, where the music I was listening to all of a sudden had this laugh come through it with an instant download of the joke, which started to make me laugh. It was a really bizarre experience, very strange. It was during this experience that I also had visions of how fluid matter was, and how matter and this 3D reality field was like the canvas for an artist to express itself. I also had a vision and feeling of Earth being a giant eye, wherein I was merely a small speck on the surface of the pupil observing the rest of the universe around us. Needless to say, it was an interesting little trip that was all in all very pleasant and enlightening. how Seraphim are depicted from Judeo-Christian angels with 6 wings and all the eyes was something I thought this entity was, or possibly an ophonym, normally depicted with the bands of rings within rings, like wheels within wheels, with a load of eyes on it. I've also seen an actual 6-winged Seraphim being in my dreams one time, hovering in the sky beside me with 2 wings hiding its face whenever I went to look at it. I remember that distinctly. I remember I was in a car weirdly with Paul Check when I was doing his holistic therapy course. So I was battling a systemic fungal infection at the time, which is funny. He's had one similar when he was like in his late teens, and you just have to manage it for the rest of your life. But I remember being in the car, and he was driving, I think, or I was driving, and I remember just seeing, following me along this road where I used to live, this seraphim being, as you can see here, with 6 wings. And I can see in my periphery that the 2 wings that cover its face was open, but then as soon as I go to look, it quickly covers its face. And so I was like, wow, this is exactly how you see images depicted of like these so-called seraphim beings, right, as mentioned in the Judeo-Christian pantheon of these entities. And this is where I was a bit like, again, these entities, these beings aren't really explained in the freedom teachings, but they could be maybe connected into even higher dimensional beings that go into the deity planes and the higher god worlds. That's kind of what I speculated anyway. So I'm sure how mystics and pop culture depict them are how they look, and I'm sure there is a higher order of beings that goes above and beyond the genealogy of beings that have been presented by the MCO AMCC teachings, which could better describe them, or perhaps some of the Seraphim, Rishi, or Avatar level identity of these beings can take on this form. Recollect density 4 is like liquid light, and so they still harbour the kind of genetics of, I guess, in the template genetics of the Seraphim races, which is where the insectoid, reptilians, and avian life forms have come out of, which when spliced with humanoid form, right, could maybe give you some kind of composite of a 6-winged individual being. I mean, I couldn't see its face, but it certainly had like eagle type wings, and it was just hovering there and following me at the same speed to the right of me for like a few minutes before it then turned off and it kind of disappeared. So that was a very interesting experience. So I had another interesting experience in synchronicity whilst at work, where I was basically working at a car detailing place called Pro Motors in Folkestone, right, where they kind of a second-hand used luxury European car dealer, where I had a weird encounter with my boss, who for a moment when I was moving a car with a colleague, he looked back and smiled at me with this overlay of a reptilian coming through him that looked like a ghastly smile. Wherein I commented to my colleague, geez, he looks bloody evil with that smile. Where my colleague immediately replied along the lines of, yeah, he's got you exactly where he wants you. Which is probably a subtle hint to forces behind or beyond the conscious minds of these folks, working through them, letting me know, what was going on. So I actually saw like this holographic reptilian come through and reveal itself to me through my boss. Really bizarre. Whether it was the day this happened or later, I can't recall exactly, but not long after me having that weird encounter, I was reading a book by Neil Haig called Aeon Rising, as you can see there, and I finished up on a page one night that showed a sketch of his representing a Draco warrior commander, as you can see there on the left, who was wearing a red robe with a hood with the Spido logo on its chest. But the next day I come into work and sat down in the morning with our usual meetings. Lo and behold, my boss is sat there with a red zip-up hoodie with the Spider logo, exactly how Neil Haig had sketched in the book, apart from my boss still appearing human, obviously. Okay, so yeah, it was quite an interesting synchronicity there that kind of tied into me seeing this reptilian form behind him that might have been connected into. He probably has no idea, but is otherwise using him as like a little pawn down here. That this is otherwise a famous brand, I think was created actually in Colorado and Denver. I forgot the name of it, but it's like an alpine famous kind of winter sportswear brand. So whether he was an actual shape-shifting reptilian, I have no idea, but it seems that everything becomes so interactive in the hologram with synchronicities like this that can be very revealing as to the kind of forces that may be working through individuals, places, and corporations that can go into this concept of disclosure, which appeases some kind of universal law within the hologram, mainly consent, silent acquiescence. It's almost like the presence of certain forces leave their mark in the hologram that can be picked up on anything and everything around you with events such as this, that can obviously only be picked up on once you become aware of what is going on, which is often only a sub and unconscious activity. Thus, the whole process of awakening and shadow work is integrating that part of yourself that became lost in the sub and unconscious worlds of your body where the denizens of the shadow operate, which reclaims your ability to be more consciously involved with reprogramming your reality and recognizing the tricks and traps that are inherent everywhere, whether done through psychotronic weapons, implants, advertising programs, belief systems, unresolved trauma, black magic, etc. So you can gain a foothold and safeguard in your temple and navigating this matrix not only with more ease, but with more intelligence, as in also intel, gathering intelligence through becoming a lot more observant, where you're not unconsciously giving your power away to beings and structures who prey on your ignorance in order to do so and are able to navigate the hologram diligently. I think there's probably the number one problem on the planet is people's lack of information and knowledge of evil and these devices of all these tricks and traps, and them falling victim to silent acquiescence, right? And not withdrawing consent and consciously saying, no, back off. Even to these at a human level, these institutions with the governments and all these other corporations, right? For the small print terms and conditions, the legalese, the legal tricks and traps, it's so important and powerful to just say no, right? And be informed, study, get the knowledge, gain intel, because this battle is all about intelligence. Unfortunately, a lot of people have not got it. All right, here we go. This was a gnarly experience. New Forest November trip, 2019. I think it was literally on bonfire night, so the 5th of November. Remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. That, unfortunately, during the week, my housemate went mushroom hunting and he managed to pick a load of Liberty caps, and he kept nudging me to buy some off him to take, because obviously I've spoken to him in the past and told him about a few of my experiences, but I was saying no. Initially no. I felt like I gleaned what I need to glean from the substance, and I'm at a good place frequency wise. I don't feel like I need to be drawn to taking them. But then I had a busy week, and I think come Friday I bump into him in the house again, down in the kitchen, and he's there and he's like, really pushing, like, oh, just buy something, you can have it half price, da, da, da. So I thought, all right then. So I bought some off him. It was like 4 grams of these Liberty caps that he picked locally. And I think it was the next day, on the Saturday, I drove down to the New Forest. And so I ingested the mushrooms. I think it's 4 grams. It's really rainy, miserable day. And I remember parked up somewhere where I can kind of see into the woods. So I think around probably the half an hour mark, it was starting to dial in. And with that, I think it was plugging me into and opening myself up to the energies and the grids there in the New Forest, because the first thing I saw was on one of the trees, or a few of the trees actually, there were like these real weird hieroglyphics etched on them that started to reveal themselves to me. And as soon as I started seeing that, all of a sudden I just got really ill feeling again, like real poisonous. It was like poison mushrooms. And I was thinking, oh no, not again, not again. It's a similar experience to what happened during the Easter 2019 rituals, when I was in the bath and I started seeing my somatic patterns of the symbols on my forearms. And so as that was kicking out, I realized, okay, I need to get out of it, because this place is very dense. Like New Forest, no one knows about New Forest in Hampshire/Dorset, South England. It's full of witch covens, secret societies, a lot of billionaire mansions that are probably part of the Illuminati. A lot of sick stuff probably goes down there in a lot of those estates, especially. So it was no good. And I remember, thinking, right, I need to get out of here. And when I went to go to reverse, there was like all these wild horses that all of a sudden like just came out of nowhere, stopping me getting out there for like 10 minutes, waiting for them to pass. And I was just there like, oh no, I need to get out of here. This place is like sickening with this satanic energy. And so they clear, and I remember getting in my car and just driving, and I drove back towards Bournemouth. And on my way back, I remember hearing on the radio, I was listening to Radio 1 and changed the radio station, changing frequencies. So I was very like, again, irate with this ill energy. And what it felt like, it was weird. What it felt like, there was like a couple of beings actually following me in the astrals that were very powerful, like gargoyle type beings that were just kind of like, again, emitting ill frequencies and trying to suppress me and compress me. And just give me all this discordant energy attacks. And I remember over the radio, I think it was Clara Amfo, one of the radio hosts, BBC, she went to announce the next song by Skrillex called Where Are You? It's a song by Skrillex. But as she said the song's title, Where Are You?, another voice came through and it went, Where are you? Like real demonic, like, Where are you? And I was thinking, oh my God. So I turned off turn off the radio. And again, I remember driving up and down, I think Bournemouth, the coast of Bournemouth, a few times up near where I was living in Boscombe, just to see whether I can shake these energies and like the feeling of these entities trying to like follow me. And so I couldn't nudge it, I couldn't shake it. So I thought I was just gonna get back into the room. And I remember parking up just down the road from our houses, so we had to park on the road. And as soon as I parked up and got out, there was this car that kind of like all of a sudden like screeched its brakes and came around the corner and just parked up right opposite on the other side of the road, kind of slightly in front of me. And it was this woman, and she immediately looked at me and got on her phone and looked really concerned as I kind of got out and put my hood up because it was still raining, walking back towards the house. And it was like she knew exactly what was going on, but she was concerned about what was happening to me with whatever was going on, right? And so I found that a really bizarre observation, that she immediately went on her phone and she was speaking to someone and she was looking at me as I walked past, like really concerned. I managed to kind of like was looking at her as I walked out of sight and then just focused on getting beelining it straight into my room. So I beelined it straight back into my room. And long story short, I was there for quite a while. And what it felt like was that I'd been, again, pulled into like a lower timeline or stuck in between spaces interdimensionally where I felt like I'd been stabbed and killed. And there was all this noise going on in the house in the room next door where the living landlord had all these like weird, had all these tools next door because he was like a mechanic, a part-time mechanic. Like he had all these old cars that he used to do up in his front yard. He's got all his tools, and I remember hearing him in the room next door, like opening and smashing these drawers, and as if some of them were falling over, and all the tools were kind of falling on the ground. It was like a lot of discordant energy. And I remember laying there on my bed, again thinking I needed to kind of shake this because it felt like these entities had got to me and they were trying to do something to me. And I remember thinking, right, the last time I shook off the energies, I played some music and I did a bit of dancing and leg stomping. So I tried that, but to no avail this time. And I was doing it for like 5 minutes. I was like, it's not shaking the energy. Like, what is going on? And so I remember just kind of like submitting myself, lying on my bed. And I remember hearing this commotion again outside. I don't know whether it was linked to the woman who was concerned that the living landlord, I can hear like a few muffles of people talking back and forth, but everything was going like, I had like dysphoria and my senses were blending again. I couldn't really focus on what was being said and what was going on and where I was because I felt like I was kind of between dimensions and stuck in an in-between state. And I kept getting visions of my granddad who actually on November 5th, I think he ended up basically dying from a violent fire in his van. That he basically blew himself up because of suicide, because of money problems on November 5th, which is, it's all tied into this force of Antares and astrology, which is very sinister and malevolent, and it kind of governs and is the main cause of like assassinations and stuff like this, like violent deaths. That was coming through, and I kept like feeling like I was him in that experience, and I was getting all these flashbacks of him being stuck and being burnt alive basically in his van. So it knocked him out unconscious. And what else was happening was I remember having a silver ring on my finger, and I was on the bed and they were opening up. So I had like invisible beings like manipulating my physical body, and they opened up my hand in order to drop the ring off. So they didn't like the silver in the ring for whatever reason. And I remember feeling like all these invisible needles were being pushed into my head, into my brain, that were poisonous, that were freezing my consciousness over, and they were trying to split my consciousness into and show me this lower timeline they were trying to align me with me losing my mind and kind of being set up with this scenario of being found with mushrooms and all this like very paranoid kind of future, that I was thinking, nah, I can't be having this is ridiculous. And so I remember just kind of pulling myself back, and because at the time I was training or doing like self-learning of playing piano. So I had an 88 key replica digital piano with a stand, and I was learning on YouTube how to play like certain songs. And there was one Coldplay song that I remember just jumping on, and I thought I'm just going to try and remember how to play because I needed something to focus my consciousness, because it was like being frozen to the point where I'd like all my thoughts were just going and going and going and being taken away from me. And so I remember just getting up and sitting on the piano and just key by key putting back together the sequence of what I'd learned for the last few weeks of this Coldplay song that I'd been practicing. And it probably took me 10 minutes in order to get the first sequence put together. And as soon as I got that first sequence put together of how the song goes, the melody, it acted to dispel again all of this sick energy that was going on with me and bring everything back to normal. And so then I was like, oh my God, yes, okay, things are flowing. I got my consciousness back. I got my ability to think back. The energies are stabilized, and these evil forces were dispelled through me remembering how to obviously put together this song sequence again on the piano. Okay, and obviously I had the piano on loud, so it was actually distributing the sound tones as well around me, which obviously would have helped. So that was at that particular time the method that got me out of that kind of precarious situation. And what was interesting, when I kind of came back and I was going through like having a really rough time trying to think about, how to shift these energies, my housemate texted me saying, "How are you?" As if to imply like, "How you getting on?" Because I know you're taking the mushrooms, and I'm part of the forces nudging me to nudge you to get them and take them, because they're laced and they're poisoned, and they're running the Jehovah's trumpets and the Metatronic frequencies, because they're here in England. England is like a very dense grid given the location of Universal Stargate 11 and the Michael Mary lines and all the Nibiru crystal grid here through Stonehenge, which is the first point of call, anchored in from the moon, the Saturn, Phantom, Arcturus. So I was really, unfortunately, a bit of a Trojan horse that was, that he was connected into, without a doubt, similar to, my experience with the Easter 2019 rituals with Crowley Jr., and him messaged me an image of, the snake trying to eat the earth with this Luciferian spirit that he harbored. Same thing was kind of going on with my housemate, which I knew was an infiltration attempt that I should have been wiser, but luckily I pulled myself back from it. But what was interesting, what you see here on the slide, that happened the following week, I had a headache for, I think, probably a full week, right? I just wasn't, it took me some time to kind of heal from that. So it was just like, I literally felt like I was being dragged into a lower timeline, but then pulled myself back again into dimensionally speaking. So I had outpitched like this massive headache all week. But I went back to work, and I think it was probably around midweek, like Wednesday, Thursday, where I'm listening to Radio 6, right? BBC Radio 6, in the warehouse, detailing cars. And over the radio, I hear the news. And it's the only time that they mention this, because there's obviously news updates every hour or so. And it was only around just after lunch, there was a mention of, satanic stabbings in the New Forest. People, residents are concerned, la da da da, that there's been a few more satanic killings and rituals that have gone on in the New Forest, which is nothing new. It's happened before. And I was thinking immediately, oh my God, I was there Saturday. I wonder whether this is connected into, me being there and them having to do this in order to kind of redistribute the energy into the grids, given that maybe my presence upset the order of energy that they wanted flowing there due to what I'm carrying with the Christic spirals, right, and the Christic energies, that they had to then go and do this in order to re-establish the energies of the grids there, which you can see, there was a few stabbings of these sheep, and whoever stabbed them obviously then, sprayed them with the pentagram and the upside down cross. And there was one left in the middle of this lane with a pitchfork through it with an upside down cross again. Then one of the churches had 666 sprayed on there on the door, but otherwise had been kind of cleaned off. But you could kind of almost see the etching, the kind of echo and the shadow of it. And there's a title there, "Sheep Stabbed to Death and Painted with Satanic Symbols in New Forest." And that was on the 25th of November 2019. That was obviously published as an article, but it happens days, I think within days after me having my experience, okay, that I only found out about kind of the week after. And what was weird, that same afternoon, I then get a phone call from a good mate of mine whose brother I used to kick around with, but he was a bit of a loose cannon, who was otherwise threatening to jump off the building in, I think, Perth, where he was, or Melbourne in Australia, where he'd moved to many years ago, running the business. That his brother was concerned and phoned me and asked me to phone him, and I tried, and I was speaking to him, and it just wasn't making any sense. Luckily he didn't jump, but he was a troubled soul. He definitely had some big issues going on. But it just, that afternoon, it was like this kind of heavy frequency. As soon as I heard about this, I was kind of like, the frequency of the place dropped a little bit. And obviously finding out about my mate having issues, almost jumping, from, I think it's like a 10-story hotel that he was in, because it was obviously, given the time difference, it was like late at night there, maybe just after around midnight or something. And I was thinking, whoa, this is pretty sinister. And I was thinking BBC Radio 6 is obviously connected into the, the 666 as well. And I was thinking, wow, did that happen because of I was there on the Saturday, with what I experienced and what happened. Who knows? I can only speculate, but you've got to put two and two together. So it's very timely indeed. But otherwise, very fortunate again that I pulled myself back. And after that point, I realized that I cannot trust anyone else when it comes to putting substances in my body. And like I said, even before that, I was kind of at that point where I felt like I gleaned what I needed to glean from, taking what was on offer for me for my growth up to that point since my activation with these mushrooms for this lifetime. But that, again, Scorpio season was another very testing initiation of being confronted again with pretty evil satanic forces, then outpictured with these rituals that went on. And since then, it's actually been quite frequent. Punch in Google New Forest satanic rituals and attacks, and you'll see a lot of what's going on since that event. Unfortunately, that's been quite frequent ever since then, given the fact that we know what's going on. Earth's under the occupation of the Fatali. There's a lot of these fallen angelics on planet at the moment, and there's this hashing and tearing with this end time scenario of them trying to, do as much as they can to bag, tag, and drag as much quantum as possible. But very indicative, I think, of the grid work that these Satanists were doing in order to re-establish maybe some damage that was done with my presence being brought there in that heightened state. Who knows? I can only speculate, but very interesting and timely indeed when you connect the dots together. That's why I say, guys, do not try this at home. It is no joke. Do not put yourself in that precarious situation. And with these substances especially if you're not clearing them as well before, and you've not picked them and you don't know where they've come from and understands the teachings of the grids and what's going on energetically, you got to be, I'm lucky. I'm very lucky that I've got a very strong template, a very strong coding and ability, which again I think goes into this archetype almost of a fear kiss, right? Because it definitely, I think, it's has saved me with this kind of, like, I guess 9 lives. I think I got more than that, but this kind of failsafe, I guess, that's almost like in me. I can get to a point where I do suffer, and I've suffered a lot, and I've come up against some pretty evil entities and forces and energies, right, and experiences. But when it gets too far, there's intervention. There's something that's bringing me back each time, and I've had quite a few of those experiences of NDEs and timeline slips where I've experienced some pretty horrific things and then just been brought back to this timeline, right? So yeah, I've got to thank, I guess, my higher self, God source, first eternal, in order to put up with, I guess, some of my foolery on this journey, right? The fool's journey, the hero's journey, in order for me to be a bit of a wrecking ball for the forces of darkness, which has kind of been my nature. I don't like these liars, these deceivers. I've always wanted to give them a taste of their own medicine, but more, in order to fight back. So I just don't want to be this docile, doormat, love-light and clueless individual. I want to make a stand and be that kind of zero tolerance of the Christ. But yeah, probably put myself out there a little bit too much. But I guess that's how God made me, and I'm here to do that. And that's obviously irritating the forces of darkness, and that's what gives me the most amount of joy. And anything that's otherwise connected into this fraudulent, lying, deceitful system and entities that have created it and are running it. So that being said, moving on to Christmas 2019 Kundalini experience, which was very interesting. Okay, off the back of me settling down after that experience. So all the while, this is around obviously December 2019. All the while, little did I know that the Illuminati puppets on planet were conducting their 2020 pandemic preparations with their Event 201 scenario, sponsored and fronted by Bill Gates and his false Trojan horse Metatronic controlled death care science dogma, directed by the Fatali, which according to the MCC teachings, they've been in control ever since, I think, 2012. But before the events of 2020 unfolded, I had an interesting experience around Christmas where I had been preserving the chrism, which is semen retention, for some time in order to try and unlock a Kundalini experience after coming into this knowledge with Manny P. Hall's and Santos Bonacci's work of the astrobiological interpretations of scripture, where the spine is Jacob's ladder with the 33 vertebrae leading up to Golgotha, which is the place of the skull, where Jesus was crucified, which is where our pineal gland and pituitary glands are, that supposedly release certain fluids whenever the moon transits our sun sign at birth, that get deposited into the sacrum at the base of the spine, which is the chamber of secrets or secretions, which can be returned up the spine if one was virtuous and consciously working with this process, which ties into the whole regenerative principles of Scorpio, again, as we have covered. Manny P. Hall writes of this process, open quote, The exact science of human regeneration is the lost key of Masonry, for when the spirit fire is lifted up through the 33 degrees or segments of the spinal column and enters into the dome chamber of the human skull, it finally passes into the pituitary body, Isis, where it invokes Ra, the pineal gland, and demand the sacred name. Operative Masonry, in the fullest meaning of that term, signifies the process by which the eye of Horus is opened. The pineal gland is the sacred pine cone in man, the eye single, which cannot be opened until Chiram, the spirit fire, is raised through the sacred seals, which are called the seven churches in Asia. End quote. So I must have been approaching day 40 of semen retention when on Christmas Eve I unlocked this potent force that had laid dormant in the base of my spine. I remember going off to bed that night and before sleep fantasizing in my mind's eye having sex with a girl I used to fancy at university, which awakened some powerful energies in my lower chakras that shot up my spine, which propelled me out of body in some other reality where I was ascending/flying up at the same rate as this energy traveling up my spine, where I was overlooking an ambient crystal world with a huge tree in the middle of this village that surrounded it, and continued to travel upward until I had reached the top simultaneously with the energy in my spine reaching my head, where I came back in body and was flooded with the biggest natural high and release of endorphins I've ever felt. That lasted a good 3 to 4 hours afterwards. This is very interesting, as I was trying to unlock this process on and off throughout all of 2019, but only had success on Christmas Eve, which made me think whether this phenomenon can only happen around this time due to astronomical or mystical alignments attributed to that time of year, which is symbolized in the whole Christmas ritual with the tree representing the spine, lumber associated with the tree, the sacred fluids released from the pituitary and pineal glands can be seen as Santa descending down the chimney, also representing the spine and depositing the presents, which are the sacred fluids, right, under the tree at the base of your spine. We also have a claustrum in the brain, sharing the same root as Klaus in Santa Claus, while the S in spine has the pine in it, which is linked to the pine tree used at Christmas, whereupon a golden star or angel normally sits on top, which in the anatomy would be the pineal gland, again, which has another pine in there in the word. So it's very interesting. So following this theme of how the mystery schools taught of how consciousness evolves from the mineral, plant and animal kingdoms, we see inherent in the human form the remnants and influence of the plant kingdom in the form of not only our chakra and plasma body energy centers that look akin to flowers, but also with us being portable trees, with the spine being our trunk, our limbs the branches, our guts the soil from which the rest of our body draws its sustenance from within the roots of our cardiovascular system, our seed being found within the generative processes, but also our thoughts which defines a person's life, and outward appearance and achievements which would be akin to its fruits. The plant that all occultists love referencing to entertain this idea is found with the careful observation of the mandrake plant that bears similar characteristics to a human figure, as you can see there on the bottom left on the slide. But on a subtle body anatomy level, it certainly is to do, and a lot of the anatomy is linked into flowers, as you can see there, the diagram of our plasma body anatomy, especially with the lotuses that are tied into our chakras. As we have seen with the precessional slippage, we have this galactic alignment of the cherubim with the fixed signs that would have the sun around December 21st, with the winter solstice aligning with the cusp of Sagittarius and Scorpio, sandwiching that solstitial point, which could also aid in this mystical raising of the chrism. Yeah, that's another big one actually. Yeah, if you do the actual sidereal alignments, winter solstice will be now aligned with that kind of cusp between Scorpio and Sagittarius, with Aquarius, everything's being pushed along, right? With Aquarius now at the cusp of Pisces on the spring equinox. So as we know, it shares an important role with the stellar activation cycle, where the vertical gates open as above, which may share a similar phenomenon that happens as below within our microcosm. I've not been able to replicate it since. Whether it is a once-in-a-lifetime event or an event that has to be managed with careful prudence with other factors that are very delicate, that hang in the balance in order to achieve, that I may have been in luck with that one time, who knows. All I know is around 6 months after that event, I was able to trigger the raising of the Kundalini energy by focusing my intent on that region of the perineum to no higher than my throat, with more of a slower, playful movement to it rather than a sudden bolt straight up my spine. This may be an allegory for the serpent and the staff, as the Kundalini energy is very serpentine with how it moves in the abdomen, which reminded me of the kind of contortions of a belly dancer that this energy excites around the spine, which is representative of the staff, wherein if you can control this energy, you can direct it up your spine and use this energy for higher means, which goes into regeneration, sexual transmutation, and assisting in manifesting our desires, which the Uraeus represented, which is the secret symbol of the constellation of Scorpio, funny enough, which represents the regeneration of the same power that in the form of a dragon or a coiled serpent lays helpless under the foot of the one who has tamed their dragon / mastered this energy, and like a Theakis is in control of the serpent, which could represent this most potent universal energy. This could also be the explanation behind the mystery of the great work and turning one's lead into gold in the mystery schools. And as Manly P. Hall states, open quote, it was customary for the philosopher to conceal the element of earth under the symbol of the dragon, and many of the heroes of antiquity were told to go forth and slay the dragon. Hence they drove their sword, the monad, into the body of the dragon, the tetrad. This resulted in the formation of the pentad, a symbol of the victory of the spiritual nature over the material nature. The four elements are symbolized in the early biblical writings as the four rivers that poured out of the Garden of Eden. The elements themselves are under the control of the composite cherubim of Ezekiel. End quote. Moreover, Manly writes, open quote, those not raised to spiritual life by initiation are described as dead from the sting of a scorpion. Close quote. Very interesting. So this is why also in Egyptian symbolism they have the Djed, okay, you see there in the bottom right, which is a pillar representing stability that looks very similar to the handle of a lightsaber that a Jedi, or just put a D in front of there, D-J-E-D-I is the Djed, Jedi as pronounced in Egypt, and obviously Jedi is just J-E-D-I in the Star Wars film franchise. So this handle looks very similar to the lightsaber that a Jedi, or Jedi for D, would use after mastering his or her mental, emotional and spiritual bodies inherent with taming the serpentine forces that lay hidden within. The Djed pillar would lead to the eye, pineal gland, and in Matthew 6:22 it says, the light of the body is the eye, if therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Hence why the Jedi, or Jedi, as portrayed in Star Wars, wields a lightsaber that is representative of the control reflected within their own Jed eye, as in D-J-E-D hyphen E-Y-E, as in an eye, an actual eye, which is spine and pineal gland, mind, symbolic of control over the mental and emotional bodies. The colour of the lightsaber representing the force that is being channeled along the spine inherent within the chakra system, and the access to the force, which represents ether, the ability to manipulate the material reality around you through the four elements, which the uraeus represents as the cobra top, symbolic of being able to strike out and manipulate the matter field around you. Kenneth Scott from Gemstone University has an interesting viewpoint on the chakras, open quote, if we look at the out picture of our energetic chakras, we have 7 continents. 6 of the continents start and end in the English language with the letter A. 1 has the first syllable and sound tone as the word as in you are, like in Iraq. In German and other prototypical languages, that root word or that sound tone means the primordial ancient, the original source of something. It is also the prefix of the word urinology and urine. Where does urology start? In the root chakra. Controlling that root and birthing an artificial construct from the land of moving up into the second chakra, the root chakra is going up that spine in Africa, in the Nile River and into Jerusalem. The second chakra being in Iraq, and the money system being controlled in this place called Zurich. There's again in Zurich. Moving that creator capacity where we are supposed to ground ourselves into the body, but it's lifted up to the second chakra. So instead of being integrated, balanced, whole and grounded, we are short-circuiting and we keep on spewing out our creative capacity by that build-up of charge and discharge and so forth, where the male principle is constantly in rut and constantly seeking to express itself by fucking the world, basically, and creating this externalized system of money and law, which we are bound by contract, jurisdiction, all the rest, and we are taken into their temples of justice, where we keep on being charged and discharged and creating more and more of this money system continuously and by design, intended to be for eternity. So the third chakra is Asia, the fourth is Australia, the fifth, the communication center, is North America, the sixth is South America, and the seventh is Antarctica at the South Pole, covered with ice, frozen. So we don't really have our seventh chakra opened. We don't have our root chakra grounded. We can't receive from ourselves a higher level of understanding and inside information. We can't ground into our physical body. All of this manifests itself through symbolic things where the Jewish and their temple rules have to cover their seventh chakra, the kippah, or the yarmulke, or koppel, it's called, because we don't want him receiving anything other than what we want him to receive. The priests of the Catholic Church must bind their fifth chakra so they don't speak the truth, clerical collar. The Hindu Brahmins must have their women put a symbolic band-aid or cap on their sixth chakra, which is their third eye, so they don't see anything. The Christians must box in their heart chakra. the cross, cube symbolism. This is the dance of Salome, sealing the chakras, closing them off so we're not open, we're not grounded, and we're not receiving our higher intelligence, and we're not really capable of expressing through the rest of the system. Close quote. This otherwise confirms the nature of the mutations that are evident throughout the stack of creation from the macrocosm to the microcosm, as we have already found, but otherwise bridges beautifully into the kind of manifest structures of our society, which ties right back into the two-pillar Freemasonic system of control. An important point when realizing that those who are in control of themselves with these energetic centers are a lot harder, if not impossible, to control, and certainly become a force to be reckoned with, as portrayed with the Jedi. The Djed was a pillar born of a tree that encased the tomb of Osiris that supported the temple of a king in the land of Byblos, before which Set had lured Osiris into the tomb and thrown it in the river Nile to dispose of him. The date in which Osiris was tricked by Set and entombed in the myth, according to Plutarch, was the 17th day of the month Atur, when the sun was in the constellation of Scorpio. Manly P. Hall writes, open quote, "This is most significant, for the scorpion is the symbol of treachery," close quote. Thus, in Egyptian myth, Scorpio is personified by Typhon and or Set, Christian myth Judas, Lucifer and or Satan, Norse myth Loki, and so on it goes with the battle between the forces of light and dark, the sun and Saturn, God and the devil, the Jedi and the Sith, Middle Earth and Sauron, the Guardians and the United Intruder Resistance, or the negative alien agenda, the law of one and service to self, etc. The hero's journey, where initiation happens through coming against the forces of evil, Scorpio, that lay in wait to test your resolve for wanting to claim back your inheritance from which these jealous zealots have taken for themselves, as personified as the knowledge-coveting serpent and oppressors, Shaitani or Satan, which in Hebrew as a generic noun means the accuser or adversary, and from the verb meaning to obstruct/oppose. An interesting remark, Aleister Crowley wrote of Satan being the Attorney General and Crown Prosecutor against humanity. As the reader should be fully aware by now, as I come into awareness of why Scorpio is linked to initiation and ascension, revealing both the microcosmic and macrocosmic forces inherent with this enigmatic sign, and the great journey all initiates go through when becoming the Son of God, the universal deity who is born again and who symbolically walks the path of every hero like Hercules and endures the 12 labours through the 12 houses of the zodiac and attaining all 360 degrees in order to break the binds of their Shaitani and reclaim their lost estate amongst the deity planes through the guidance of Asclepius, Ophiuchus, through the golden gates of Scorpio, which leads one into the mysteries that lay hidden in the deep waters of the one's sub and unconscious minds, where the denizens of the shadow and potent forces of the regenerative powers symbolized as the serpent and dragon lay in wait. Don't forget the cradle of Lyra is all the way up in that section of the sky with Scorpio, Ophiuchus, and Lyra Aramatena. That's the 12th dimensional stargate according to the MCO AMCC teachings. So in Psalm 82 verse 6 it reads, "I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High." End quote. Giving us yet another lens in which to interpret, Saint Michael or Saint George slaying or taming that dragon, which is, it can represent base desires and lower animalistic self. So taming that and transmuting that force to become a Jedi, right? Using the force for goodwill rather than bad will, which otherwise would be, represented in this kind of polarity battle with the Jedi against the Sith in this instance. And take note, most of the Sith, their coloured lightsabers are red, right? And then most of the coloured lightsabers of the Jedi are anything above the root chakra. So you've got orange ones, you've got green ones, you've got blue. Okay, so very interesting. I refer to, there's obviously multiple ways of ascension, right? But I think given me in this lifetime with what's going on with this opportunity, given like a grand cosmic failsafe, there probably is like a template that obviously I've been enacting for this archetype of Ophiuchus, that whether it gives me certain upgrades or as a higher identity, it afforded me this opportunity to kind of go through that path of ascension, which is a tough one. It's a tough gig. It's not easy. There's a lot easier ways, according to the MCO MCC teachings, that you can just activate your DNA, softly and gently through these techniques, which you shouldn't really have much attention from the evil forces if you do it like, sequentially, building up your frequency patterns and, staying humble and, not really going after these guys. Unfortunately, with what I did, I was kind of speaking a lot of truth, sharing a lot of truth, sending a lot of papers with status correction, with the legal tricks and traps, exposing the system for what it is on an economic level, which is obviously, helping to wake up a lot of the other individuals. They don't want that. They want many individuals asleep and aligned with, their timeline fall. So there certainly is probably a lot easier path of ascension. But for me in this lifetime, with obviously what I chose, given the opportunity that arose with, you know, what's happening, which is a really rare event with the whole fail-safe in-breath backflow to God source eternal, given what's going on mathematically in external creation with evil getting, or, you know, the opposite expression of what God source originally intends, and the integrity of eternity being expressed, that, you know, kind of immune system fail-safe was kicked in to bring everything back into being cleansed and purified, that there's a unique opportunity, I guess, for individuals and souls to, you know, maybe walk this path and going up against it with this kind of archetype of fear kiss, right? So I can only speculate. Once I'm up and out of it and looking back, then I would know for sure. But it seems to me that, yeah, I've chosen a very difficult settings, like when, you know, you load your computer game up and you got all these different settings of difficulty levels. I've probably gone on to like heroic or legendary in this lifetime, without a doubt. But I'm sure, you know, you wouldn't put yourself in any situation that you weren't ready for, right? That you're not capable of getting through, okay, no matter what is chucked your way, right? And I'm sure there's going to be some wonderful bennies as a result of me experiencing what I've experienced when I come out the other side. So to wrap up this chapter, we can see here the famous Matrix movie. So with the Matrix movie, Neo symbolizes the initiate who is just beginning to awaken to the hive mind controlled net everyone is put under when incarnating here, akin to a simulation, or more accurately, a distorted reality field that follows his journey of awakening by first seeking the truth, meeting the necessary teachers that help him along his way, and by offering the information that is like taking a red pill, you know, a point of no return, symbolic of how information could be life-changing for anyone on this journey. The first movie depicts this process of death and rebirth when encountering the forces of evil and the opposes, which serves as an important catalyst to realize his true powers, which effectively makes him born again, where he rediscovers the intrinsic nature of the reality field he is in to be amenable to his own mind, which he uses to bend the laws of physics to help defeat the rulers of the machine-operated farming of humans, all plugged into an artificial reality field. He comes into awareness of his God self. What's not commonly known is that the same author of the Matrix franchise also wrote The Terminator, which is set before the events of the Matrix but intrinsically connected in the timeline as the machines learn of Neo, who destroys the Matrix, who is otherwise John Connor, JC as initials, where they send a Terminator back in time to try and kill him before he gets assimilated by the Skynet transhumanist AI machine takeover of humanity, which plugs them all into an artificial reality field called the Matrix, where John Connor is given a new name, Thomas Anderson, within the artificial script, whose code name as a computer hacker was Neo, an anagram for the one, representing the one we have all been waiting for, each and every one of us. But there is certainly room for speculating. An important role one man may have played in this story with the author drew inspiration from, which is Jesus Christ. But take nothing away from the journey each and every one of us can make when taking back our power, facing our adversaries and unlocking our highest and truest potential that is not reliant on external savior figures, but is guided and helped by those who may have walked it before in order to reach the redemption we're all looking for. And to quote Manny Pihal, open quote, since the Christos was the God-man imprisoned in every creature, it was the first duty of the initiate to liberate or resurrect this eternal one within himself. He who attained reunion with his Christos was consequently termed a Christian or christened man or woman, end quote. Then there's another one on the slide you can see here, open quote, the mysteries taught that during the higher degrees of initiation, the gods themselves took part in the instruction of candidates, or at least were present, which was in itself a benediction, close quote. And this is kind of what I felt like, that, you know, I'm going through this initiation in this lifetime, but not through any mystery school. It's through otherwise just this life in general and what's been out picturing me and what's been activated. That certainly feels like there's some higher beings that are directing my course of evolution down here, particularly given what's going on, none more so than my higher self. Okay, so there we have it, guys. Very interesting chapter. I'll see you over in the next one, which is chapter 11, where we're going to be going over the strawman deception, trusts, reincarnation, and consciousness traps. Okay, so we'll go into a little bit of the legalese and otherwise look at some more esoteric associations with this economic system, and especially given trusts and why trusts are set up, given the fact that a lot of these elite families know that they come back here through reincarnation. And as we'll find out with a trustee who confessed working with beneficiaries, they had remembered their past lives. Okay, so they're coming back, they know that they come back and benefit from the hard work they put in previous lives, which is adding wealth to the family, which obviously goes into, again, the bloodlines and protecting them and reincarnating into those bloodlines to benefit from the wealth that is held and hoarded in these trusts. All right, folks, so Till then, stay safe, stay sovereign as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao for now.